An 8-year-old girl was dragged out into the middle of the street by her uncle and aunt, scolded, and thrown out of the house simply because she had added 1 extra spoonful of milk for her 6-month-old twin brothers who were running a fever. The little girl clutched both of them tightly, her bare feet trembling on the sidewalk. Suddenly, a luxury car stopped. A man stepped out, and with just one single sentence, he changed the fate of all 3 children forever. Before we begin, leave a comment sharing your thoughts on this story, and on a scale from 1 to 10, tell us how many points you would give it. We wish you a few moments of peace and reflection as you listen to this story. And now, let's begin. Don't cry anymore, Luke. Ethan, please stop. I'm so sorry for both of you. Her voice trembled with hesitation and guilt. That was Emma Carter, 8 years old, living under the roof of her Uncle Frank Carter and Aunt Sandra Blake in Pasadena after her parents had died. She was thin and small for her age, her hands shaking as she carried her 6-month-old twin brothers. Luke's body burned with fever. Ethan wheezed with dry, cracked lips. Both cried endlessly from hunger. Emma opened the cupboard and pulled out the half-empty box of infant formula. She looked around, swallowed hard, scooped an extra spoonful, and shook the bottle until the powder dissolved. The faint scent of milk made the babies pause for a second, then cry even louder. Emma whispered like a prayer, "Just this once, please stop crying, don't let them find out. Please, God." The sound of heels stopped right behind her. Sandra Blake stood in the kitchen doorway, eyes sharp as knives. "What do you think you're doing, you little brat? I told you 1 scoop a day. Didn't you hear me?" Emma clutched Ethan tightly, her voice breaking. "Auntie, they have fevers. Please, just this once. I promise I'll work harder. Please." Sandra snatched the bottle from Emma's hand, without even glancing at the babies. "You always have an excuse." With a tilt of her wrist, the white milk spilled across the floor. "If you want milk, go beg for it on the street." Frank Carter finally got up from the living room chair, his dark t-shirt smelling of cigarettes. He leaned against the doorframe as if watching a show. "Useless kid, living off us and still acting smart. If you're so thirsty for milk, then go out there and beg. This house doesn't raise thieves." Emma dropped to her knees, one arm holding Luke, the other clasped together, her voice breaking apart. "Please, Uncle, Auntie. My brothers have fevers. They need milk. I'll wash dishes, mop the floors, do laundry. I'll do double the work. I'll do everything, if you'll just." Sandra stepped forward, shoved Emma's hands away, and slapped her hard across the cheek. "I told you already, didn't you understand?" She grabbed Emma by the hair and yanked her across the floor. "Get up, out, now. Don't, Auntie. Please, just let the babies drink." Emma clung to the edge of the table. Luke let out a piercing scream. Ethan clung to his sister's collar in fear. Frank walked over, threw the front door wide open, and spoke slowly like passing a sentence. "From now on, you're out. Don't come back until you learn respect. And don't let the neighbors see this shameful scene." Sandra gave a sharp tug, dragging Emma and the 2 infants onto the street. "Go live out there. This house doesn't feed trash like you." The midday sun poured straight down on the burning pavement. Emma's bare feet pressed against the cement, filthy and sore. She struggled to hold both boys. Luke lay in her left arm, his body burning with heat. Ethan pressed against her chest, wheezing for breath. "Please, Aunt, Uncle, I'm sorry. Let me clean for a whole week if I have to. I won't take any more milk." "I swear." Sandra gave a harsh laugh, standing on the porch like a guard. "What's a thief's promise worth?" Frank glanced at the neighbors, peeking out from behind their curtains. "Get back inside. None of you are involved. And you, get away from my door right now." He kicked the iron gate, the metallic clang ringing loud. The door slammed shut, the lock sliding in place. Emma froze in front of the door. She set Ethan carefully on her lap, then used her free hand to knock gently. "Sir, please, just let my brothers sit in the shade for a little while." No one answered. Inside, it was as silent as if the cries had never happened. Across the street, a woman lifted her phone, then set it back down, looked around, and quietly pulled her curtains closed. A man sweeping his yard paused, frowned, then turned away. On the Carters' porch, the doormat still read, "Welcome," like a cruel joke. Emma sank down on the curb, her trembling hands barely steady enough to hold both boys. "Luke, stop crying. Ethan, breathe in, breathe out." She swallowed her tears, trying to keep her voice calm for them. "I'm here. I'll find a way. Don't be scared." The door creaked open a crack. Sandra poked her head out and tossed down an old cloth bag onto the steps. "There are a few diapers in there. Take care of yourselves, and don't dirty my porch." The door slammed again. The scrape of the bolt dragged long and cold. Emma bent down to pick up the bag. Inside were only a few thin diapers. No milk, no warm cloths. She clutched it to her chest like a shattered hope. "Thank you." The words fell into the empty air. The boys sniffled again. Ethan coughed, his body shivering. Emma kissed each of their foreheads. "I'm sorry I took too much. I know I was wrong. But I couldn't stand seeing you cry like that anymore." She stood, staggered a few steps, then sat down again, dizzy. Sweat clung to her neck, her hands shaking from hunger and fear. She knew what she had to do: carry them down the street, knock on doors, ask for a little milk, ask for some warm water. But her legs felt weak as noodles, and what she feared most was hearing the same curses hurled at her from another door. "Don't cry, Ethan. I'll go ask. Luke, look at me. We're not giving up, okay?" Emma pressed her forehead against Luke's cheek. The heat from his little body made her eyes sting. Behind them, Frank's voice came through the closed door. "Step back a little. Don't stand in front of my house." His tone carried disdain, paired with a half-smile as if he took pleasure in the suffering of the three unfortunate children. Emma swallowed hard, stepping back onto the sidewalk. She leaned against a lamppost, set the diaper bag down, then lifted both of her siblings back into her arms. She didn't dare put them on the ground. "We'll wait until the sun eases a little, then we'll go. I promise." Time dragged on. The buzz of a lawnmower hummed from the yard nearby. A dog barked from a neighbor's porch. The faint breaths and intermittent cries of the two children weighed on Emma's arms like stones. "I don't know what else to do, Mom. If anyone can hear me, please help us." The words slipped out like a breath, not meant for anyone in particular. She didn't expect an answer. She only spoke so silence wouldn't swallow her whole. Then another engine sounded, smooth and steady, like a restrained breath. A dark Lamborghini rolled forward and stopped in front of the three siblings. The tinted window slowly slid down. A man around 60 looked out. His hair was silver at the temples, his eyes deep, his hands resting calmly on the steering wheel as though long practiced at holding steady in life's storms. He didn't speak at once. He looked at Emma, at the flushed faces of the feverish children, at the faint white stain of milk still damp on the girl's shirt. Emma parted her lips, her voice hoarse, her mouth dry from sleepless nights. "Sir, please, just a little milk for my brothers. I promise when I grow up, I will pay you back." In that instant, the man's gaze froze, carrying both wisdom and hesitation. This was David Mitchell, a technology entrepreneur from Los Angeles. He stared for a long time, as if seeing a distant day from long ago. Then the car door began to open. When the car door opened, David Mitchell stepped out, closing it gently behind him, sunlight catching on the shoulder of his white suit jacket. He was the founder of a technology corporation specializing in data infrastructure and cloud services. His work was to sign decisions, set standards, and keep the machine running smoothly. 22 years earlier, his wife had died after giving birth to twins. Since then, he had raised his two sons alone, guided by a schedule packed to the brim and dinners that passed in silence. People called him a reserved man, living quietly in a noisy city. David Mitchell had just driven back from Forest Lawn Cemetery. He had laid a bouquet of white flowers on his wife's grave and stood for a long time without finding words. Today, he had not called his driver. After each visit to the cemetery, he always drove himself, his hands on the wheel helping him keep his breath steady and his grief hidden from the eyes of others. At home, it was an unspoken agreement. On the days he visited her grave, he would take the wheel, and Michael and Daniel would quietly sit in the back. But right now, in front of him, stood a little girl holding two feverish twins, their faces flushed, their eyes wet with tears, caught between fear and stubborn determination. Emma leaned forward to shield her younger brothers. She swallowed hard and spoke quickly, as if afraid the chance would slip away. "Please, just a little milk for them. They will get weaker without something." David did not answer right away. He crouched to her level, studying each child carefully, then pressed the back of his hand to Luke's forehead, burning hot. Ethan wheezed, his chest rising and falling in hurried effort. David slipped off his jacket, draped it over the 3 siblings' shoulders, and tucked it tight to keep the wind from seeping in. "How long have they had the fever?" David asked. "Since last night." Emma pulled the corner of the jacket closer around Ethan. "I will work harder. I just need a little milk for them." The front door behind them shifted slightly. Sandra Blake peeked through the curtain, her eyes flashing cold. She muttered loud enough to be heard. Another fool caught up with that bunch. Frank Carter stood behind the doorway with his arms crossed. His gaze slid over David as if he were looking at a piece of trash. Then he called out with mocking emphasis, "Well, isn't this David Mitchell himself? What wind blew you here? My advice is to stay away from those pests. That girl just stole milk. I had to throw them out, consider it a lesson." A few neighbors peeked from their doorways, then quickly pulled back. A man sweeping his yard slowed down but avoided catching anyone's eye. No one stepped forward. The street stayed quiet, as if nothing had happened. David turned his head toward the Carter's house, but said nothing. His look lingered on their door, holding a pause like a warning. Then he quickly returned to the children. He reached out to lift Luke. "Let me carry this boy. Your arms must be tired." Emma startled at the politeness and certainty in his voice. She hesitated, then shifted Luke into his arms. David held the boy close to his chest for warmth. He looked at Emma once more. "What's your name?" "My name is Emma Carter. This is my little brother. His name is Luke, and Ethan." Her voice was hoarse, trembling, thin as if it might vanish at any moment. David gave a slight nod. "I'm David." A warm gust of wind blew through. Emma glanced quickly at his hand, holding the edge of her coat. On his finger was a silver wedding band, old and faded. She spoke softly, almost to herself. "I've seen you with that ring before. I think you were in Forbes magazine, the one my dad used to read when he was alive." The moment she finished speaking, Ethan jerked violently, coughing hard, and then bursting into a loud cry. The sound pressed heavily on the air, thick and suffocating. She frantically tried to soothe him. "It's okay, Ethan. Milk is coming. Be good." "They need to drink and get their fevers down," David said firmly. He pulled his coat tighter around them, his eyes never leaving the children's faces. "Do you have diapers?" "I do, but only a few left." Emma pointed to an old cloth bag on the ground. Sandra pulled the door wider with a snap. "Hey, don't put on a show in front of my house." David turned his head, his tone calm but unyielding. "I think you should go back inside. Anyone who throws their own nieces and nephews out of the house has no right to speak to me." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried solid strength. Sandra scoffed, slammed the door, and bolted the iron lock. David looked back at Emma. "Come with me." He bent down, picked up the worn cloth bag, slung it over his shoulder, then cradled Luke tightly in his arms. With his free hand, he steadied Emma's elbow so she wouldn't stumble as she held Ethan. The 3 of them turned their backs on the steel gate that had just slammed shut. A black Lamborghini stood parked at the curb, its polished body catching the midday sun. David opened the rear door with practiced ease. "Get in. We'll stop by a store first, then head to a safe place." Emma settled Ethan into the seat, still keeping her hand on his chest to calm him. She looked up to thank him, but her words caught in her throat when she realized the back seat wasn't empty. 2 young men were already seated. The one on the left wore a gray shirt, his tie loosened, eyes stern and direct, jaw tight with irritation. They were Michael Mitchell and Daniel Mitchell, David's 22-year-old twin sons, raised in Los Angeles, and accustomed to everything being punctual, spotless, and orderly. Michael was the first to lift his head, frowning at the sight of Emma and the 2 small boys. Daniel shot a quick look toward their father, his forehead clearly lined with displeasure. No one spoke right away. The brief silence was heavy, like a stone dropped into water, rippling outward with its first circle. David leaned slightly, motioning for Emma to move closer. "Come with me," he repeated, then guided her hand as she placed Ethan beside her, while he held Luke firmly in his arms. The car door remained open. The gaze of the two young men revealed undisguised resistance. The air inside the car tightened at the very moment the story was just beginning. David leaned over, placing Luke into the back seat. Careful now. He set the baby gently in her lap, then helped Emma climb onto the seat. Hold Ethan tight. Emma nodded and pulled her coat over her baby brother's chest. She hesitated, glancing at the two young men already waiting inside. One wore a serious, restrained expression. The other had sharp eyes and a mocking look. Michael Mitchell looked up first, his voice low but edged. "Dad, who are they?" "Children who need help," David said in a deep tone. He fastened Emma's seatbelt and checked Ethan's neck. Daniel Mitchell snorted and gave a short laugh. "You're used to this by now. Your pity is always foolish." Emma flushed red and held her brother closer. "I'm not asking for money. I just need milk for my brothers." Her words made David swallow something hard in his throat. He started the engine, his hands steady on the wheel. "We'll stop at a nearby store first." The road slid away behind them. Emma kept Ethan propped in a half-sitting, half-cradled position so he could breathe easier. Michael glanced into the mirror, his irritation plain. "Can't you see you're being used? Once they latch on, you'll never get rid of them." David didn't answer. He turned into a corner convenience store in Boyle Heights and braked smoothly. "Stay inside. Lock the doors." He looked at Emma. "I'll be right back." Inside the car, the silence grew heavier. Daniel leaned his head back against the seat and tapped the dashboard with his finger. "See, Mike? Our afternoon meeting's done for." Michael didn't take his eyes off the mirror. "Shut up." His gaze shifted to Emma, his tone dry. "What's your name?" "Emma Carter." "This is Luke and Ethan." She drew in a breath. "They're only 6 months old." Michael met two pairs of tear-reddened eyes, then turned toward the window. "And where are your parents?" Emma tightened her grip around Ethan. "They threw me out. I begged for milk for the twins. They refused." Just as she finished speaking, the car door opened again. David returned with 2 paper bags and set them on the floor. He handed Michael a bottle of water and a pack of wet wipes. "Clean your hands." Then he pulled out infant formula, a small bottle, a plastic spoon, children's fever medicine, even a thermometer. His movements were quick, without unnecessary words. Emma watched his hands tear open the packet, pour in the formula, add warm water from a thermos. David shook it well, dropped a little onto his wrist to test the temperature, then spooned it out carefully. Luke first. He supported the baby's neck and fed him 1 small spoonful at a time. Luke sucked slowly, his eyelids fluttering. Ethan watched and whimpered between sobs. Michael turned away but couldn't stop watching. Daniel swallowed hard, then exhaled. "Dad, you can't keep doing this forever. Dad is doing the right thing right now," David replied calmly. He set the spoon down and checked the temperature with a thermometer. "Moderate fever. Drink more water." He opened another bottle, touched its rim to Ethan's lips, and tilted it ever so slightly. Ethan hiccuped once, then swallowed. Emma watched, disbelief and emotion rising all at once. "You know how to feed a child like that." "Done it before," David said simply, then looked over at Michael. "Get a warm towel. Wipe Luke's forehead." Michael hesitated for a beat, then picked up the towel. His movements were clumsy, his hand trembling though he tried to hide it. "Is this good enough?" "Yeah." David nodded. "Gentle." Daniel let out a soft chuckle. "You're wiping him like it's a screen." "Shut up," Michael said, but his voice had shifted, lower, softer. Ethan slowly calmed. Luke's breathing grew steadier, his tiny hands clutching David's wrist. Emma blinked rapidly to hold back tears, then whispered, "Thank you." David capped the bottle, put the spoon and container back into the bag. "Now we go somewhere safe. Then call a doctor." Michael frowned. "Where do you plan to take them?" "Home," David answered without hesitation. Daniel sat up straight. "Whose home?" "Mine." David started the engine. The reply was short, final. He left no space for his sons to argue. The car cut through intersections. Emma held Ethan silently. Every so often, she looked down at Luke in David's arms as if afraid he might vanish. Inside the car, the faint scent of milk blended with the sterile smell of hand sanitizer. Michael glanced at the children, then at his father. "You know what this will bring, right?" "I know," David said, eyes still on the road. "And I'll do it anyway." Daniel exhaled long and leaned his head against the glass. "Perfect. Just another ordinary day in Los Angeles," Emma spoke timidly. "I don't want to trouble you. If tomorrow you change your mind." She paused, her voice shrinking as if scared of her own words. "Please give my brother one last meal." The car slowed. Ahead was the parking lot beneath a glass tower in downtown Los Angeles. David steered into his private space and shut off the engine. In the sealed quiet, Emma's words hovered like a scratch that would not fade. Michael turned, no longer smiling. Daniel stopped joking. Both looked at the girl at the same time, then at their father. The elevator doors opened in front of them. Emma clutched Ethan tighter. She had said what she needed to say, and the home of a stranger stood right there. The elevator opened. David carried Luke in one arm, his other hand gently supporting Emma's elbow. Daniel came last, tapping the code to unlock the door. The apartment lit up as the system activated automatically, the steady hum of the air conditioning filling the space. Emma froze for a beat at the threshold, clutching Ethan tighter, her eyes darting as if she were afraid of touching something that didn't belong to her. "Come in," David said softly. He set Luke down on the long couch, slipped off his shoes, then opened a side cabinet to pull out a light blanket. "Place Ethan here. Let me check his temperature once more." Emma obeyed, lowering herself onto the edge of the couch, her arms still wrapped around her little brother like the last protective shell. Michael tossed the car keys onto the table and headed straight into the kitchen, opening the refrigerator to look for water. Daniel pulled out a chair, leaning back with a lazy air, though the irritation in his eyes hadn't faded. David spread the blanket, added a pillow, and laid both children on their sides. He handed the thermometer to Emma. "Hold this for me." Then he went into the kitchen, boiled water, measured out a dose of fever medicine, and returned patiently to give it drop by drop. The children let out faint sighs, then their breathing evened. Emma bent down, pressing her cheek to her brother's forehead, her shoulders easing slightly as if a heavy weight had just been set down. She stepped back, her hand clutching the hem of her shirt. "I can sleep in the kitchen corner, as long as my brothers have a place." Michael let out a mocking laugh without looking directly at her. "See, Dad? She's already used to being a servant." David spun around. "That's enough." His voice was low, firm, decisive. Michael fell silent, his eyes darkening, as if an invisible line had been drawn in front of him. A floor security guard, his name was Howard, peeked in through the door that Daniel had left slightly ajar. He was in his 30s, an African-American man, gentle and quiet. "Everything all right, Mr. Mitchell?" He stopped at the threshold, not stepping inside. David nodded. "Thank you, Howard. Everything's fine." The door closed again, and privacy returned. David set a pot of canned chicken soup on the stove, pulled out butter, cheese, and sliced bread. He worked quietly, making grilled sandwiches. The smell of melted butter drifted through the air, soft and warm. Emma sat up straighter, watching his hands as if they were performing a ritual from another world. Daniel glanced over and shrugged. "We have a meeting at 7 o'clock. Eat first," David said. Dinner was laid out simply: soup, grilled cheese sandwiches, and a plate of thinly sliced apples. Emma looked at her plate, then at her brother's. She tapped her spoon lightly, sipping only a few mouthfuls of soup. The bread on her plate remained untouched. Michael noticed. He said nothing, only pushed his plate of apples toward her. Emma startled. I don't need it. You should eat." "Don't you like apples?" Michael replied shortly, turning his face away. Daniel gave a mocking laugh, tore off a piece of bread, and chewed slowly, as if savoring the discomfort of others. David didn't comment. He only poured more soup into Emma's bowl. "Go ahead and eat. Tonight you'll need strength to take care of your brothers." After dinner, David made a short phone call, his voice calm and low. "I need a pediatrician to come check on them." "No, not an emergency, but tonight, thank you." He hung up, returned to the living room, and adjusted the blanket over the children. Ethan flinched lightly, then went still. Luke turned his face into Emma's hand. "Your room is here." David led Emma down a short hallway and opened a small room with a single bed already made with clean sheets. "Keep the pillow propped up a little higher for Ethan. Put Luke on the outside so he's easier to carry." Emma stood at the doorway, not stepping in right away. "You're letting us stay here. What about you?" "I'm right next door." David opened his own room across the hall and switched on the light so Emma could see its location. "If anything happens, call." She nodded, her eyes fixed on her brother's. Her whole body seemed ready to split in two so she could guard both sides at once. "I'll clean the kitchen. I'll wash the blankets." No need," David cut her off. "Tonight you only need to sleep." Michael leaned against the wall, arms crossed. He watched the scene like someone on the outside, yet he didn't leave the doorway. Daniel had already stepped out onto the balcony to make a call, his coarse laughter spilling into the night before fading. Emma went back to the living room to get the old diaper bag. She walked lightly, as if afraid to dirty the floor. David handed her another paper bag, a few tiny bodysuits he had just bought at the store, some cloth diapers, a bottle of rash cream. Emma took it with trembling hands. "Thank you, sir." "We'll talk more tomorrow," David said. "For now, let them sleep." The lights in the room dimmed. Emma lay on her side holding Ethan, her other hand resting on Luke's back. She bent down and whispered into her little brother's ear. "Tomorrow we'll leave. Don't get used to this place. This isn't our home. We're only asking to stay one night. They've already given us too much." The children's breathing grew steady. Emma lifted her head, glanced toward the foot of the bed, and saw David's coat spread across their legs like a temporary boundary of safety. She closed her eyes, not sleeping, only listening. The bedroom door opened slightly. A figure leaned against the frame without entering. Michael. His eyes paused on Emma's thin shoulders, drifted across the two children sleeping fitfully, then stopped at his father's coat. Inside him, something collided: suspicion, unease, and another quiet trace he hadn't yet named. He closed the door without a sound, but his hand lingered on the doorknob, still warm with a question he didn't dare speak. Michael closed the door and leaned against the wall, his hand still resting on the knob. He listened to the steady breathing of the two children, and to the whisper of the unfamiliar little girl who had just told her brother, "Don't get too used to this place." The words lodged in his chest like a thorn. He left the hallway, passed through the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and drank in one long swallow, but it did nothing to ease the tightness inside. At that very moment, in a house in Pasadena, a sharp female voice cut through the tense silence. "Where are they? Did that old man really take them away?" Sandra slammed her hand on the dining table, a glass tipping and spilling water across the wood. "We've lost custody, and with it, the inheritance." "Do something, Frank." Frank Carter lit a cigarette, drew in deeply, then crushed it out right away, forcing himself to stay calm. "I know who to call." He pulled out his phone and dialed. Barnes. On the other end came a man's voice, low and dry as paper. "William H. Barnes, a civil lawyer on Wilshire Boulevard, notorious for never asking right or wrong, only what's in it for us." "Mr. Carter, it's late. Mitchell has the kids. I want you to do whatever it takes to bring them back." Barnes paused for a few seconds. "If it's only temporary custody, I need a sharper angle. Child abduction has a nice ring to it. I'll file an emergency petition with a request for visitation rights. In return, what share of the estate is mine?" Sandra snatched the phone, her voice urgent. 20%. 30. Barnes replied without hesitation, his tone unchanging. "And neither of you ever breathes a word about prior arrangements." Frank looked at his wife. Sandra clenched her jaw. "Fine. Send me the paperwork tonight. By tomorrow morning, we move forward." Barnes hung up as if shutting the lid of a box. Meanwhile, downtown, the lights still burned in an office where Detective Maria Santos sat hunched over a stack of case files. She was around 40, her hair tied neatly back, her eyes sharp and steady, the kind of eyes forged by years of picking through wreckage. A new alert appeared on her screen. The re-examination results of the car accident that had killed Emma's parents. The technical report was brief. Brake line showed signs of mechanical tampering prior to impact. Maria lifted her head, exhaled, then picked up the phone. Forensics, I need confirmation of tool marks, and send me high-resolution images. She quickly scribbled down a list of names. Frank Carter, Sandra Blake, William Barnes, and one last name, underlined twice. David Mitchell. She sent an email to the on-duty prosecutor, marking it as high priority. Then she reopened the map of the accident route, circling the traffic cameras. If this was a staged accident, there will be a shadow near the car before it started. Her voice was barely above a whisper, as if speaking only to herself, but her hand was already pressing the command to extract the footage. Midnight. The penthouse was steeped in soft golden light. David dozed off in an armchair, shoes still on. Daniel had gone back to his room, the door closed. Michael paced around as he often did when tense, stopping in the kitchen. A faint rustle. Michael turned his head. In the small room, Emma crouched beside the bed. She lifted the pillow carefully, slipped something underneath, then set it back down. Ethan stirred and whimpered. Emma froze at once, wrapped her arm around his back, and patted him lightly, as if she had practiced that motion 1,000 times. Michael stepped inside, his voice curt and sharp. "What are you doing?" Emma flinched, clutching Ethan tightly, her eyes wide open. I was just afraid we might get thrown out tomorrow, so I kept something for my siblings." She reached under the pillow and pulled out a small piece of bread wrapped in tissue. "This is in case they don't give us food." Michael stood watching for a long moment. His throat was parched. The word "you" he had just used sounded crude in a room that smelled of baby formula and children's sweat. Ethan smacked his lips and drifted back to sleep. Luke's breathing was rough but steadier than it had been in the afternoon. Emma still held the bread crust, her eyes lifted, waiting for judgment like a child long accustomed to punishment. Michael pulled his hand from his pocket slowly, under the pillow. "That will attract ants. You." He swallowed the word, fumbling with the pronoun. "You should keep it up there on the shelf. Tomorrow there will be breakfast, and no one is going to throw you out." Emma nodded, but her eyes stayed guarded. "What if? What if you change your mind?" "My father doesn't change his mind that easily," Michael said, dry but firm. He looked at the two children, then turned to leave. Before he stepped out, he placed an unopened granola bar on the shelf. "Leave it there." Emma watched him go, her lips shaping a very small "thank you." The door closed, his footsteps faded. In the room, Emma pulled the blanket over her siblings' stomachs, leaned back against the wall, and kept her eyes open. She still didn't believe, but something in her chest eased, just an inch. Michael returned to the kitchen, opened a cabinet, and found a set of children's plastic dishes he had no idea when his father had bought. He sat down, resting his elbows on the table, staring out the dark window. The distant rim of the city glowed faintly. He didn't understand why a crust of bread weighed so heavily on him, but he knew he would be there early in the morning. At dawn, Frank received a call. A man's voice shot quickly into his ear. "I saw the kids. Tell Frank right away." At the garage gate of David's building, a stranger leaned against a column, a phone wedged to his shoulder, his other hand holding a camera. He snapped pictures of the black car's license plate, the private elevator entrance, and even the Mitchell nameplate beside the card reader. Location confirmed. "Someone coming in and out is a black guard, about 30. I'll keep following." On the other end, Frank gave a dry laugh. "Good. Don't get spotted." He hung up, stuffed the camera inside his coat, and pulled his cap low. The garage lights flickered once, then stilled. His shadow slid behind another pillar, waiting. And above, the whole building slept, unaware that darkness had already crept into its backyard. The morning had not yet warmed. The doorbell rang, long and sharp. From the security desk, Howard called up, "Mr. Mitchell, there are police officers here to see you. They say it's under an emergency order." David opened the door. Two officers stepped in first, followed by a broad-shouldered man in a dark shirt with a name badge that read Frank Dalton. He was the county sheriff, his voice smooth like someone used to press conferences. "We're here under an emergency filing in family court. Attorney William Barnes submitted a petition accusing Mr. Mitchell of child abduction. This is a temporary custody transfer order to the legal guardians. Michael and Daniel stood apart along the hallway. Emma carried Ethan out of the room, while Luke slept in David's arms. The girl looked at the white paper as if it were a sentence handed down. David kept his tone steady. "Do you have a search warrant, Mr. Dalton?" "This is a temporary custody transfer order." Dalton raised the paper again. "If you cooperate, everything will move quickly. After that, DCFS will evaluate the care environment, and the court will decide." Emma held Ethan tighter, trembling. "I was not kidnapped. They threw us out on the street. They gave my brother only 1 spoonful of milk a day. Last night he had a fever." Dalton did not look at Emma. He jotted something in his notebook, then pushed a pen toward David. "Sign here. It confirms the temporary transfer. The children will be returned to their relatives." David sat Luke down gently in the portable crib, then lifted his head straight. "You're sending them back to that hell?" A young officer standing near Dalton shifted his eyes slightly, while Dalton smirked. "You are obstructing procedure. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Michael took half a step forward. "Dad, let me call the lawyer." "Call him." Dalton flicked his hand dismissively. "But the clock is ticking." Suddenly, the elevator doors opened. A woman in a dark suit, her hair pulled tightly back, stepped out, breathing lightly from walking fast. Detective Maria Santos raised her badge. "LAPD, I need to speak immediately with Mr. Mitchell and Sheriff Dalton's team." Dalton turned, a thin smile curling. "Santos, what are you doing here?" Maria did not smile. She set a file folder down on the table, her voice clear. "The accident that killed the children's parents was not an accident. The technical report confirms the brake line was tampered with. I've already forwarded it to the prosecutor. That means Frank Carter and Sandra Blake are subjects of investigation for suspected abuse and conspiracy to seize assets." The living room felt as if all the air had been drained out. Emma clung to Maria with her eyes as though holding on to a lifeline. Michael opened his mouth, then shut it again. Daniel suddenly stopped joking. Dalton gave a thin smile. "That report isn't an indictment yet. Custody still belongs to them." Maria nodded, but she didn't step back. "That's true, but you can't force a handover when there's clear risk of harm. DCFS must be fully alerted. I've already sent an urgent email with the evidence, and I will file a written report if anyone tries to send the children back into an abusive environment." Dalton stared at Maria for several seconds, his jawline tight with irritation. He snapped his notebook shut and shoved his pen into his pocket. "Fine, then you'll take responsibility if anything happens." He turned to David. "We'll be back. Don't take the kids anywhere." "They're staying here," David answered, steady and firm. Dalton pivoted on his heel. Just before stepping into the elevator, he leaned toward the man beside him and muttered, "Call Barnes. Remind him not to let the evidence leak." The elevator doors slid shut, and for a brief moment his distorted face flickered in the steel reflection. Silence returned to the apartment. Maria let her shoulders ease down and lowered her voice. "I'm sorry for barging in like that, but I needed to stop them immediately." David nodded. "Thank you." Maria looked at Emma. "Can you tell me briefly what happened last night? Just the main points." Emma swallowed. "They threw us out. My aunt poured the milk on the floor. My uncle said to beg on the street. My little brother had a fever. Mr. Mitchell gave him milk, called a doctor. I wasn't kidnapped." Maria jotted down a few lines. "Good. I'll file the report today. Someone from DCFS will come to interview you, but the context has changed. Don't be afraid." Michael looked at Maria, then at his father. He spoke softly, almost confessing to himself. "I'll stay home today." Daniel shrugged, but he didn't argue. "Me too." Maria picked up her file and added a warning. "If anyone comes without a clear order, don't open the door. Call me directly." David accepted her card. "I will." Maria left. The door closed. Emma stood frozen for a few seconds, then suddenly stepped forward, wrapped her arms around David's waist, and pressed her face into his shirt. "Please, don't let them take us away." David placed his hand on the girl's head and said nothing, but his hand held on tightly. David's hand was still resting on Emma's hair. He bent down, speaking slowly and clearly. "No one is taking you away." Emma nodded, then stepped back into the room to hold Ethan. Michael stood in the kitchen corner, watching her go before turning back to his father. "Are you really planning to keep them? We're not an orphanage." His voice was sharp and weary. David pulled out a chair and sat, his eyes steady. "You just heard what the police said. These children need safety, but this is our home." Michael raised his voice. "You're always opening the door, but whoever closes it for you." The clink of a spoon hit the table. David laid his palm down firmly. "That's enough." He rarely raised his voice, but this time he didn't look away. "They are human beings, not burdens." The hallway swallowed the words into silence. Emma stood at the doorway, hearing it all. She carried Ethan out to the balcony, pressed herself into the shadows. Tears slid down her cheeks, but she didn't dare sob. "It's okay, Ethan. I'm here." The baby clutched her collar tightly, his breath short and hot. Daniel passed by, about to throw in a joke to cut the tension, but he stopped when he saw Ethan's tiny hand gripping Emma's shirt, as if letting go would send him into an abyss. Daniel swallowed his words, paused for a second, then pulled the balcony door just enough to block the draft. "Just lock it lightly," he murmured. "The wind's shifting. They'll catch cold easily." Night fell. David called their pediatrician on video, asking her to monitor their temperatures and make sure they stayed hydrated. The children settled for a while, then Luke's fever spiked hard. His face flushed bright red, his body trembling. Emma pressed her hand to his forehead, her own face turning pale. "Grandpa." His fever's climbing. The thermometer blinked, the number jumping past the warning mark. Emma dropped to her knees on the floor, clutching Luke as if holding on to his breath. "Please, Michael, can you drive me to the hospital? Please." Michael froze, his eyes glued to the glowing red number. He glanced at his father. David gave the faintest nod. "Go now." Michael stepped forward, taking Luke into his arms. His grip was awkward, but steady. "Get a thin towel. Daniel, bring the bottle. The car's in level B," he muttered, as if reciting instructions to himself. The elevator hummed down smoothly. Emma held Ethan tight to her chest, rocking him to calm his cries. David went down with them to the garage, buckling the car seat himself. "Call me when you reach the hospital," he said. "I'll follow right behind." The nearest hospital was Cedars, Sinai. The emergency room lights burned bright, people moving in and out non-stop. Nurse Carla was on triage duty, a Latina woman in her 40s with a firm yet warm voice. "Symptoms?" she asked quickly. "High fever, 6 months old, eating little, breathing fast," Michael answered, setting Luke down on the small bed. Emma stood close, gripping her brother's hand without letting go. Nurse Carla set down the stethoscope and called the doctor. "Dr. Patel is on his way." Dr. Neil Patel, the night pediatrician, was lean, his eyes shadowed from too many long shifts, yet still steady and alert. He arrived, quickly checked the child, ordered tests, fever reducers, and respiratory monitoring. "No one leaves," Dr. Patel said softly. "I need to watch the reactions." Michael stood close to the bedside. For the first time in years, he found his hand reaching out to hold someone else's without thinking. It was Emma's hand, cold and trembling. He squeezed it gently. "She's going to be okay," he said, unsure whether he was comforting her or himself more. Emma looked up, startled by the strange reassurance in such an unfamiliar moment. She nodded, not daring to let go. Ethan had already fallen asleep against her shoulder, his lips moving with the rhythm of his breath. 10 minutes later, Dr. Patel returned, his voice calming. "The fever is responding well. Breathing is steadier now. We'll keep monitoring for another hour. There are no signs of severe dehydration. The baby will be fine." Emma exhaled audibly, tears falling onto Luke's hand and soaking into the sheet. Michael let go, stepped back, as if afraid someone had noticed. He went outside and called David. "She's past the crisis. The doctor said they'll observe her a little longer." On the other end, David only replied, "Good," then stayed silent for a long time. Finally, he added, "Tell Emma to drink some water. Don't let her stand too long." Michael hung up, walked into the hallway, and washed his face. The neon light reflected his tired features. He pressed his forehead against the mirror for a few seconds, then turned toward the vending machine for coffee. As he rounded the corner, he stopped abruptly. At the far end of the hall, near the nurse's station, Sandra Blake was pressed close to a young nurse, slipping a brown envelope into the woman's uniform pocket. Sandra's voice was low but sharp. "Just delay the paperwork. I need those kids out of that room. Do you understand?" The young nurse looked nervous, her badge reading Megan. She glanced around, then nodded quickly. Michael didn't listen further. Anger surged through him, fast as the red pulse of the emergency lights. He crushed the paper cup in his hand, and in that instant, he knew this moment would bring far more than just another long night in the ER. Michael stepped back into the alcove, his hand still gripping the coffee cup. Sandra slipped an envelope into the pocket of the young nurse's scrubs, whispering quickly, "Change the notes. Write that it was a fever caused by poor care. Write that it was from lack of hydration, lack of hygiene. I need that file." The nurse lowered her head, her voice trembling. I can't do that." "Do it. I'll take care of the rest." Sandra squeezed her shoulder, then hurried toward the elevator. Michael lifted his phone, set it to silent, and snapped several quick photos. He caught the moment Sandra pressed the envelope into her hand, the badge that read Megan, and the corner of the hallway with the signboard. When Sandra disappeared, he walked straight to the desk and set down his cup. "Megan, right?" His voice was calm but firm. She flinched. What do you need?" "I need you not to destroy a child's life over an envelope." Michael's eyes locked on hers, not threatening but unyielding. "You can hand it back right now, or I send this clip to security and the inspector." Megan bit her lip, pulled the envelope out, and shoved it into his hand. "I'm in debt. I was stupid. Please, let this go. I'm not the one who decides." Michael slipped the envelope into his coat pocket, snapped a few more photos of the seal, and stepped back. He opened a new message to Detective Maria Santos. "My name is Michael Mitchell. I have photos of an attempt to alter records in the ER. The one paying is Sandra Blake." He attached the pictures and added a short note. Luke was admitted. The doctor brought the fever down. "We're at Cedars-Sinai." The message sent. Michael exhaled. He realized he had just chosen a side. For the first time, he was standing fully with the father. At that same moment, in a private room behind a steakhouse on Wilshire, William H. Barnes sat across from Frank Dalton. Two other men were with them, a local campaign strategist named Randall Pierce and a junior clerk from family court, Olivia Chen. Olivia was young, her eyes cast downward, speaking little. Pierce, on the other hand, spoke often, his voice raspy and slick. Barnes set a thin folder on the table. "We need an emergency hearing. Before the weekend, I'll submit an additional report about an unfit environment for children. The bait is the ER tonight." Dalton leaned back with his arms crossed. "I'll sign a document recommending DCFS reconsider immediately. Use the phrase, risk of neglect." Pierce poured himself a drink, smirking. "Local media loves a story about an eccentric millionaire kidnapping kids. If necessary, I'll leak a few bits to stir up public pressure." Olivia lifted her eyes to Barnes. "As for the schedule, I can't change the judge assignment, but I can push the file through early, put it right at the top of the morning stack." "Do it." Barnes gave a faint smile. "The rest I'll handle." Dalton gathered his papers and jerked his chin. "And remember, don't let that evidence leak. If that break report makes it into this hearing, everything falls apart." Barnes nodded, sealing the point as if with a stamp. That night, the city beneath the penthouse lay like a quiet carpet of light. David sat by the window, hands clasped, staring without really seeing. The call from attorney Lucy Graham had just ended. "They're going to hit us on procedure, on psychological assessments, on claims of instability." Lucy had urged him to prepare every document, from security footage to the signed approvals of the family physician. The bedroom door was left ajar. Emma stepped out barefoot, holding an empty bottle. "Grandpa." David turned. "Are the two of them asleep?" Emma nodded. "Luke's fever is better. Ethan ate well." She stood at the edge of the rug, hesitating for a second. "If it's because of us that you're suffering like this, we'll leave. I know how to take care of my brother. I could ask someone to let us sleep on a porch." David frowned, then walked over. He placed a firm hand on her shoulder, pressing gently, as if to draw a line. "Number, from now on, I won't let anyone take this family away again." Emma looked up at him, her eyes caught between disbelief and fear of hoping too much. "Your family, sir?" "Ours," David corrected, his voice steady though not loud. "You're not going anywhere." Emma nodded, clutching the empty bottle as if it were a promise. "Yes." She turned back toward the room. David stayed, watching the glass pane a while longer. He saw his reflection blur in the glow of the city, and behind him, 3 small figures lay asleep, piled on top of one another. He thought of his 2 sons. He thought of the hearing, and he knew this was not just a matter of procedure. It was a vow. The next morning, Howard called upstairs. "Mr. Mitchell, someone from family court is here. They have a summons." David went to the door. A man in a gray suit stood waiting, briefcase snapped shut, introducing himself briskly. "Kyle Alvarez, process server for the court." He drew out a thick envelope and handed it to David. "Emergency hearing summons. Thursday morning, 9 o'clock, Los Angeles County Family Court." David signed the receipt. As the door closed, Emma walked past carrying Ethan. She caught sight of the envelope in his hand, and for a moment, she forgot to breathe. On Thursday morning, David wore a dark suit, holding files under his arm as he guided Emma through the metal detector. Michael walked beside them, carrying the evidence bag. Daniel followed quietly in the back. Lucy Graham, a sharp civil attorney specializing in family cases in Los Angeles, was already waiting in the hallway. She said calmly, "Stay composed. Speak only the truth of what happened. I will guide you." Inside the courtroom, Judge Rebecca Hart sat high on the bench, her gaze steady and words measured. On the left, William H. Barnes adjusted his tie with confidence. Frank Carter's face was cold. Sandra Blake held a tissue, her eyes red but dry. In the gallery sat Detective Maria Santos and Ada Patricia Coleman as observers. A court clerk read the file and called the case. Barnes began. "Your Honor, Mr. Mitchell is a lonely man with an unverified psychological history. He lost his spouse years ago, lives in isolation, and is prone to impulsive actions. He removed the children without notifying their legal guardians. That is not the behavior of a stable environment for raising children. We request that custody be immediately restored to their relatives, Mr. Frank Carter and Mrs. Sandra Blake." Sandra rose at the right moment, her voice trembling. "We loved those children. We raised them since my sister passed away. He ripped them out of my arms." Lucy stood and spoke firmly. "Your Honor, we have a direct witness, Emma Carter." She turned back. "Emma, all you need to do is tell the truth." Emma stepped forward, her small hands clasped tightly, eyes fixed straight ahead. "Your Honor, if they loved us, why did they give my baby brother only 1 spoonful of milk a day? Why did they pour milk onto the floor and throw us out on the street? My brother was only 6 months old. That day he had a high fever. Mr. Mitchell gave him milk and called a doctor. I was not kidnapped." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Hart struck the gavel once, signaling order. "The testimony is noted," Lucy continued. "We called Detective Santos." Maria walked to the stand. "Your Honor, the results of an independent mechanical inspection confirmed that the brake system of Emma's parents' car had been tampered with prior to the crash. I have submitted the report and the scene photographs to the prosecutor." She placed a sealed file on the desk. Furthermore, on the night of admission at Cedars, Sinai Mrs. Sandra Blake attempted to alter medical records to create a case of neglect. Here is a photograph taken by Michael Mitchell, along with the sworn statement of Nurse Megan, who handed over the envelope and signed the report. Lucy held up the enlarged photo, Sandra's hand clutching the envelope, Megan's badge visible, the hallway markers clear. A wave of whispers rippled through the gallery. Barnes leapt to his feet. "Objection, this photo has not been authenticated." The judge looked directly at him. "Detective Santos has verified the source and the chain of custody. Objection overruled." Michael stood up, his voice firm. "I took this at the ER, 11:23 p.m. the night before last. I sent it immediately to Detective Santos." He glanced briefly at his father, then at the judge. "I stand on the side of the truth." The judge gave a slight nod. Noted. Lucy opened another file. Your Honor, we request that Chief Frank Dalton be summoned as an administrative contact. Dalton entered under subpoena, his tie off by a millimeter. Hart stared directly at him. Mr. Dalton, did you or did you not have unauthorized contact with Attorney Barnes to pressure DCFS? Dalton avoided eye contact. I only followed the petition. Answer directly. Hart's voice was cold. Yes or no? The moment stretched. Dalton pressed his lips together. There were some recommendations exchanged. Barnes cut in. Your Honor, silence, Mr. Barnes. Hart struck the gavel, her tone sharper. This court will not tolerate manipulation of procedure, especially when child abuse is at risk. Sandra broke into louder sobs, as if to drown out the noise. Frank stood rigid, his jaw twitching. Murmurs of protest rose from the gallery. A man shook his head, shameful. The bailiffs called for order. Lucy delivered a concise conclusion. From the evidence of tampered brakes, from the interference with medical records, from the testimony of Emma and Michael, we request 1. An emergency protective order for the 3 children. 2. Termination of access rights for Frank Carter and Sandra Blake. 3. Referral of the case for criminal prosecution. Barnes tried to salvage. Mr. Mitchell may be wealthy, but wealth does not equal stability. Hart cut him off, staring directly at the defense table. The court has heard enough. She looked at Emma, then at the 2 younger children waiting in the hallway with a nurse. Her voice dropped, slow and clear. This family court exists first and foremost to protect children. She straightened, reading the ruling. The court orders. Temporary custody is granted to Mr. David Mitchell under DCFS supervision. A no-contact order is issued against Sandra Blake and Frank Carter. All evidence of suspected vehicle sabotage and witness tampering is referred immediately to the prosecutor's office. And she paused half a beat, her eyes fixed on Sandra. An order of arrest is issued in this courtroom against Sandra Blake and Frank Carter for suspected child abuse, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Handcuffs gleamed under the lights. Court officers closed in. Sandra screamed, "I didn't do anything." Frank shoved a shoulder, but his wrists were locked fast. Their shouts sank beneath the sound of stamping shoes and papers shuffling. Emma froze for a second, then spun toward David. She threw herself into his arms, her sobs breaking into words. We have a family now." David carried Luke, his other hand firmly holding Emma's, as he walked out of the courthouse with Michael and Daniel. The hot wind swept across the steps, the sound of the city pouring in like a new beginning. They looked at each other, no one speaking, yet all knowing they had just stepped through another door. A few months later, the penthouse was no longer silent and cold. On a weekend morning, the smell of baked bread and butter filled the kitchen. Daniel stood at the counter, stirring pancake batter as if he were playing music. "Emma, do you want a smiley face or a heart shape?" "A heart." Emma balanced Ethan on her hip, laughing shyly. "But don't burn another one. That was the charcoal version." Daniel winked. Michael passed by, lifting Luke high into the air. "That version costs twice as much." He turned to Emma. "Hey, writer, where's your reading assignment?" Emma pulled a folded paper from her pocket. "I wrote about the smell of melting butter. The teacher said to use our senses." She read a few short lines, her voice steady and clear. Michael nodded, unable to hide his pride. "That's really good. Next time, add a sentence about the sound." He shrugged as Daniel whistled, teasing, "You're as strict as an editor." The door opened. Grace Whitman, the DCFS caseworker assigned to follow up after the ruling, appeared with a gentle smile. In her 30s, small in frame, she always carried a notebook. "Good morning. I just stopped by quickly to see how the kids are doing." She washed her hands, played peekaboo with Ethan, then scribbled a few lines. "Sleeping well, gaining weight nicely. The house is clean and safe." She looked up, half joking, half serious. "As long as you don't leave Daniel in the kitchen alone, you're fine." Daniel immediately placed his best pancake on her plate. "Try this, proof of reform." Grace laughed, stood, and closed her notebook. "See you next month." Call me if you need anything." She gave David a reassuring look before leaving. Breakfast stretched into a game of tossing napkin balls. Luke burst into laughter when Michael made silly noises. Ethan tapped his spoon on the table in rhythm as Daniel counted 1, 2, 3. Emma wiped her brothers' mouths, then secretly slid the last piece of pancake onto David's plate. "You eat it. I'm full. No more giving up your share." David pushed it back. "You have your own." Emma hesitated, then finished the piece, her eyes lighting up like a small lamp switched on at the right moment. By noon, Emma sat at the coffee table, laying out a box of crayons. Michael let Luke crawl across the rug, while Daniel constructed a professional-grade pillow fort. "Look," Emma said softly, her hand moving slow but steady. On the paper, 6 figures stood side by side. David in the center, Michael and Daniel on either side, Emma holding Ethan in front, and Luke holding her hand. Beneath it, she printed in neat block letters, "Family." David walked out of his study just as she put the pen down. He stopped, his gaze holding a little longer than usual. "Can we hang it here?" He touched the wall above the bookshelf. Emma nodded quickly. Michael whispered, "Don't cry, Dad," then smiled as his own eyes began to sting. David hung the painting and stepped back half a pace. His vision blurred. His voice came low, carrying a trembling note Emma had never heard before. "This is what your mother wanted." By evening, they stepped out onto the balcony. The city stretched smooth like an old map, streetlights lining up into endless rows of unwritten words. Daniel clapped in rhythm, teaching Ethan how to follow along. Michael showed Luke how to do a high five. Emma sat beside David, resting her head lightly on his shoulder. "I promise I'll take care of my brothers, just like you've taken care of us," she said. David placed his hand on her back. "We'll do it together. No one has to do it alone anymore." Night came. The table was set simply. Hot soup, crusty bread, sliced apples, a bowl of salad Michael had tried to make. Daniel mixed formula for the little ones, shook the bottle dramatically, then put on a mock announcer's voice. "2 VIP guests, your meal is served." Emma laughed, took the bottle from him, tested the temperature on her wrist the way David had once done. Howard, the floor's security guard, stopped by with a delivery. He was tall, quiet, already used to the new sound of laughter in this apartment. "Package for you, Mr. Mitchell." Emma waved at him with flour still on her hands. Howard smiled, stepped back. "Happy family to you all." The door closed again, leaving behind the sound of spoons against bowls and children's babbling voices. They sat down at the table. David looked around, silently counting, as if afraid to miss someone. "Thank you for this meal," he said. "Thank you for being here. Thank you for not burning another pancake," Michael added quickly. "Thank you for finishing your plate," Daniel said to Emma, trying to stay serious but failing. Emma laughed. "Thank you for giving me a place to hang my painting." Outside the window, the city lights glowed. Inside, the warmest light came from the faces looking at each other. They touched their spoons to the soup in clumsy unison, like a ritual just learned. And in that moment, none of them were afraid of tomorrow anymore. The story closes with a warm dinner table, but its echo is a powerful reminder. Evil can hide behind relatives, behind lawyers, behind procedures, but justice will always find its way. Sandra and Frank were handcuffed not only for their crimes against the 3 children, but also for trampling the very boundary of conscience. In contrast, a single act of kindness at the right moment, a man stopping his car, a spoonful of milk, a phone call to a doctor opened the door to a home called family. Good people do not need embellishment. They are rewarded with peace and with the sound of laughter returning. Yet this story is not only about Emma, Luke, Ethan, or David. It is a question directed to each of us. If you walked past 3 children being thrown out into the street, would you stop? What is the smallest thing you can do today? A simple greeting, a hot meal, or a phone call to protect someone? Have you ever experienced a moment when help came just in time? Who has been the David in your life? I also want to ask you personally, the one watching this channel, are you doing okay today? Do you need someone to listen, even just a little? Leave a thought or a wish for the week ahead. I read every comment, and deeply value your story. If you know of a family or a child who needs support, send me a message or suggest a resource where you live so our community can raise its voice together. Do you want to see more healing stories like this? Spreading kindness is simple. Share this video, tag a good-hearted friend, and write about an act of compassion you recently witnessed. Who knows, your small kindness today might become the spoonful of milk someone desperately needs tomorrow.